Have you ever found yourself just, gazing up at the night sky or maybe even just looking at your own hand and really wondering, what is all this? Like, fundamentally, what's it actually made of? Is it tiny particles or waves of energy? Or could it be something else entirely, something that changes, well, everything? For most of us, right, our day-to-day just screams that the world is solid. It's out there. It's separate from us.
Yeah, objective reality, that's the default.
Exactly. But what if? What if that solid ground, the colors you see, even my voice right now, what if all that is just one way, like one view of a deeper reality? What if consciousness itself, the fact that you're aware that you're experiencing this, what if that's not just in reality, but it is reality, the ground floor?
That's exactly the kind of, well, mind-bending question we love getting into here. We find compelling sources, really dig into them, and bring you the most interesting insights. And today, we're really embarking on a journey into a worldview that honestly turns our usual understanding completely upside down. It's called Analytical Idealism, and it's really championed by the philosopher Bernardo Kastrup.
Analytical idealism.
Yeah, and the core idea is, well, it suggests consciousness isn't some fluke, some byproduct of, a complicated brain. It's proposing that consciousness is the actual fabric, the fundamental stuff of existence.
Wow. Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear and, I'd say exhilarating too. We're going to unpack Kastrup's main arguments step by step.
Right.
Understand how he gets to such a, frankly, radical conclusion.
Yeah.
And we want to explore how his ideas might actually solve some of these really persistent puzzles in science and philosophy. The ones that keep popping up.
The really sticky ones.
Exactly. We've got a stack of sources laying out this intricate framework, and we're going to guide you through it piece by piece, make it as clear as possible.
And what gets me excited about this particular deep dive, and I hope it does for you too, is just the explanatory power here. It offers this coherent and surprisingly elegant way to make sense of things that the dominant view, materialism, really struggles with.
Things it sometimes just dismisses, right?
Precisely, or calls anomalous. This really invites you, personally, to question some incredibly deep assumptions you might hold about reality. Stuff we just take for granted. It's more than just thinking. It could really shift how you see, well, everything.
Yeah.
Yourself, the cosmos.
Okay, so before we dive headfirst into Kastrup's view, let's quickly ground ourselves in that standard picture.
The dominant one.
Good idea. Physicalism or materialism?
Right. Physicalism, materialism. Basically the idea that the physical world, matter, particles, energy, forces, that's the fundamental stuff. That's what's ultimately real.
The bedrock.
Yeah. And everything else, consciousness included, our thoughts, feelings, experiences, they somehow emerge from complicated arrangements of that physical stuff.
Like software emerging from hardware? Sort of? Kind of, yeah. So your brain is seen as this incredibly complex biological machine. It's made of physical bits, neurons, chemicals, synapses, and your awareness, your feeling of being you, that's supposed to just arise from the gears turning, essentially.
From the physical interactions.
Right, and it feels intuitive.
Exactly. Physicalism says that brick is matter or energy. Kastrup says, nope, that brick is consciousness itself. Subjective experience.
Wow.
So this means reality at its absolute deepest level isn't made of little dead bits of matter or impersonal fields of energy. It's made of feeling, of experience, of awareness. That's its fundamental nature.
So the universe feels.
In a manner of speaking, yes. Its fundamental nature is subjective. And here's the kicker for you, listening. Everything that exists. The whole universe, stars, planets, your body, your thoughts right now, this conversation, all of it is a phenomenon within consciousness. Not bits of matter floating in space, but phenomena happening in one, universal, consciousness.
Okay, wait. So it's not that consciousness is inside the universe.
No, the universe is inside conscious, and think of it like a dream. The dream world seems vast and external while you're in it, but it's all happening within your mind. Kastrup is saying reality is like that, but on a cosmic scale, and it's not your individual mind, but a universal one.
That is, yeah, that's a massive shift. It changes the starting point for everything. So why? What problems does Kastrup see with materialism that makes him say, no, we need this radical alternative? What's broken with the standard view in his eyes?
Well, his main driver, the thing he sees as materialism's fatal flaw, is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness.
The hard problem. Right, I've heard of this. It's not just about how the brain works, is it?
Exactly. It's not the easy problems like figuring out which brain bits light up when you see red or feel happy. Science is actually pretty good at mapping those correlations. Brain activity correlates with experience. We know that.
Okay.
The hard problem digs deeper. It asks, How, and more importantly, why does basically inert, non-conscious stuff like atoms, molecules, neurons, which have no feeling or awareness themselves, suddenly give rise to the rich, private, subjective world of experience? Why is there anything it feels like to be you right now?
Why isn't it all just dark inside? Why isn't it just information processing without any feeling?
Precisely. Think about the color red. We can talk about wavelengths of light, cone cells in your eye, neural signals in your visual cortex. We can describe all the physics and biology,
Sure.
but none of that physical description explains the actual feeling of seeing red, that private subjective quality, the what its likeness of red. Philosophers call it a quale. Only you know your experience of red.
Or like pain. You can describe nerve signals.
Right. Inflammation, signals to the brain regions involved. But how does that physical stuff become the actual awful feeling of pain? Or the warmth of love? Materialism points to the brain and says it happens here, but it can't explain how the physical generates the subjective. It's just correlation, not explanation. For Kastrup, that gap is just too vast. It suggests materialism is missing something fundamental.
And this is where it gets really interesting for me. Because Kastrup doesn't just offer a different explanation for the hard problem. He kind of sidesteps it completely, doesn't he?
He totally reframes it. Instead of banging his head against the wall trying to explain how matter magically creates mind, which he thinks is the wrong question from the get-go, Kastrup says, in my system, analytical idealism, the hard problem, it dissolves, it evaporates.
Wow.
Because consciousness isn't generated by something else. It is the fundamental reality. It's the ground floor. So asking how matter creates consciousness is like asking how water creates wetness. Water is wet. Wetness is what water is. Similarly, consciousness isn't something that emerges from non-conscious stuff. Consciousness is the fundamental reality from which everything else, including what we perceive as matter, derives its existence.
So the old question just becomes irrelevant.
It's pretty much nonsensical in his framework. But it immediately raises a new question. If everything is fundamentally one universal consciousness, one single mind, well, then why do you and I experience ourselves as separate individuals? Why can't I read your thoughts? Why do I feel like me and not like everything?
Right. That seems like the new hard problem for idealism then.
Exactly. But Kastrup sees this not as a problem, but as the launching point for the next key part of his theory. It shifts the challenge from explaining mind from matter to explaining individuality from universal mind.
And this is where the big idea of mind at large comes in.
Precisely. This is the foundation. Kastrup posits that at the absolute base of reality, there's this single, unbounded field of consciousness. He calls it mind at large, or sometimes universal consciousness.
Okay.
Critically, it's not in the universe is in it. It's the only thing that fundamentally exists. It's inherently subjective. It's the ultimate experiencer. Its nature is to feel, to be aware, to live through this infinite inner life.
So not like a person's mind, but something cosmic.
Yeah, but still fundamentally mind, still subjective experience. And to make it more graspable, he often uses that great analogy of a stream or an ocean. Imagine this vast, limitless ocean of consciousness that's mind at large. It's all there is.
Just water everywhere.
It's just water. Now, everything we perceive as separate, you, me, this microphone, the stars, space itself, these are just patterns within that ocean. Ripples, currents, maybe eddies or whirlpools.
Okay, patterns in the water.
Exactly. There's nothing but the water can take on all these different forms and movements. So your individual mind, my mind, every living thing, maybe even inanimate objects in some sense.
Yeah.
They're all just manifestations, different ways this one consciousness is moving or segmenting itself. It's the living ground of being, expressing itself in countless ways.
All right. This is probably the most unique part of the theory, and maybe the hardest to grasp. If it's all one big ocean, one mind at large, how do we exist, you and me, as separate people with our own private thoughts, feelings, memories? How does that work? If we're all just water in the same ocean, why don't we just merge?
That is the absolute crucial question any idealist view has to tackle head on. And Kastrup's answer lies in a concept he borrows directly from clinical psychology and then, well, scales it up dramatically. The mechanism is dissociation.
Dissociation, like dissociative identity disorder.
Yeah. Exactly like that in terms of the underlying mechanism, though not the pathology. Think about DIDI, what used to be called multiple personality disorder. You have one single human mind, one psyche.
Right.
But under certain conditions, usually severe trauma, that single mind can fragment its awareness. It creates multiple distinct centers of self-awareness. These are often called alters or parts.
And they can be really different, right? Different personalities, memories.
Totally different. Sometimes even different physiological responses, handwriting, allergies, voice patterns. And Here's the key part for Kastrup's analogy. Often, one alter has no awareness of the others. They might not know the others exist or share memories, even though they're all operating within the same underlying mind.
Okay, so one mind experiencing itself as separate bits.
Precisely. One consciousness, but segmented. Now, Kastrup isn't saying the universe has a mental illness. He's saying that this ability of consciousness to compartmentalize itself, to create boundaries within itself, and experience itself as separate units. He argues that's a natural property of consciousness itself, not just a result of trauma.
Wow, okay, so he takes that clinical observation, the mechanism of dissociation, and applies it to the whole cosmos.
That's the move. He extrapolates it. He posits that we individual conscious beings, humans, probably animals, maybe other things too, are fundamentally like dissociated alters of mind at large.
We're like cosmic alters.
In a way, yes. Your individual ego, your sense of being me, your personal memories and perspective, that's like a localized, self-contained whirlpool of awareness within that vast ocean of mind at large.
The whirlpool analogy again.
It works well here. You're made of the same fundamental stuff, the water, universal consciousness, but you're experiencing yourself as a separate, distinct entity, a whirlpool with its own spin, its own boundaries.
So what creates that boundary?
Yeah.
What keeps my thoughts private and yours private if we're both just mind at large?
That's what Kastrup calls the dissociative boundary. Think of it as a functional partition within mind at large. It's not a physical wall, but a boundary in awareness. It's what generates our sense of self, isolates our personal thoughts and feelings, and, crucially, filters our perceptions so we don't directly experience the totality of mind at large or each other's inner lives.
So that's why I can't read your mind. We're functionally separate alters.
Exactly. Distinct whirlpools, walled off by these dissociative boundaries, even though we're ultimately expressions of the same underlying ocean. So individuality isn't a problem for idealism. It's explained by this inherent capacity of consciousness to dissociate.
That makes a strange kind of sense.
Yeah.
Our very separateness is evidence of the underlying unity, in a way. It connects us personally to this huge cosmic picture.
Yeah.
We're not just observers, we're actual differentiated parts of it. But, okay, I can hear the next question already forming. If it's all mind, all consciousness, all these dissociated bits, what about the physical world? My chair feels pretty solid right now, this desk, the microphone. It doesn't feel mental. Does idealism say this is all just an illusion? Is none of this real?
That's a really common and important question, and Kastrup is very clear on this. No, the physical world is absolutely not an illusion. It's real.
Okay, good.
However, it's not the fundamental reality itself. It is the image, or what he specifically calls the extrinsic appearance of the mental processes happening within mind at large.
Extrinsic appearance, meaning how it looks from the outside.
Exactly. Think of it like this. The physical world is what the ongoing inner subjective life of the cosmic mind looks like when viewed from a specific limited viewpoint, namely from the perspective of one of its dissociated alters, like us. It's how universal mental activity appears to a segment of itself that's functionally separate due to that dissociative boundary.
Okay, that's still pretty abstract. Do you have an analogy, maybe?
Yes, he uses a couple of really helpful ones. Let's start with the brain scan analogy. Imagine you're looking at an fMRI scan. Those brain images with colored blobs.
Yeah.
Imagine someone in the scanner is feeling deep love, or maybe they're working through a really tough math problem. On the screen, you see these blobs of light changing, showing neural activity. Now, those blobs are real, right? You can measure them. They're objective data.
Sure.
But are those blobs the feeling of love itself? Are they the thought process of solving the problem?
No, of course not.
Why?
They're just a picture of the brain activity associated with the feeling or thought.
Exactly. You're seeing the physical correlate, the outward appearance of an inner mental process. You don't feel their love by looking at the scan. Kastrup argues the entire physical universe, including our own brains and bodies, is like that fMRI scan. It's the extrinsic appearance, the objective image of underlying universal mental activity.
So my brain isn't creating my thoughts. It's what my localized thought process looks like from the outside.
That's the core idea. The brain is the image of a conscious process, not the source of consciousness. It's what a whirlpool of consciousness looks like when observed by another whirlpool.
Wow. Okay. That's different. What's the other analogy?
The dashboard analogy. Think about the dashboard in your car speedometer, fuel gauge, warning lights, or maybe the icons on your computer screen folders, files, the trash bin icon.
Right.
Those things are real, aren't they? You interact with them. The speedometer tells you your speed. The fuel gauge tells you about the gas. The icons let you manage files.
Yeah, they're functional, useful.
But they are not the underlying reality they represent. The speedometer needle isn't the actual spinning wheels or engine RPMs. The fuel gauge isn't the gasoline sloshing in the tank. The icon isn't the complex code and electrical states on the hard drive.
Okay, I see where you're going.
They're an interface, a simplified symbolic representation that allows you to understand and interact with a much more complex underlying system without needing to know every single detail. Kastrup says the physical world is like that dashboard. It's a reliable, consistent interface representing the patterns of mind at large's own thinking or mentation that allows us, as dissociated alters, to interact with each other and the underlying mental reality in a predictable way.
And the laws of physics are like the rules of the dashboard, how the icons behave.
Exactly. The laws of physics aren't fundamental laws of dead matter. They're the reliable patterns, the consistent rules of behavior of mind at large's own mental processes. They ensure the dashboard is stable and predictable for all the alters interacting with it.
That is genuinely a profound shift. So the physical world isn't the real thing generating mind, but it's a real representation of an underlying mental reality, like a shared virtual reality. But the reality it's representing is the inner life of a cosmic mind.
You've got it. It redefines the whole mind-matter relationship.
Okay, but if we are these dissociated alters, these whirlpools in the cosmic mind, what happens when the whirlpool stops spinning? What does this theory say about life and death? Does consciousness just blink out when the body dies, like materialism suggests?
This is another area where analytical idealism offers a really distinct and I think for many people a potentially comforting perspective. It completely reframes mortality.
How so?
Well, first, life. A living organism, like a human with a brain, is seen as the extrinsic appearance, the dashboard icon, if you will, of a dissociative process within mind at large.
The whirlpool in action.
Exactly. The body isn't a machine that produces consciousness. The body, especially the brain, is what that localized vortex of consciousness looks like from an outside perspective, through the lens of another part of mind at large. So life, in this view, is the process of dissociation happening. It's mind at large experiencing itself in this specific, localized, individual way.
Okay, so life is dissociation. What about death?
Death, in this framework, is emphatically not the end of consciousness. It's not annihilation. It is the end of the dissociation.
The end of the separation.
Precisely. Think about that whirlpool again. The specific pattern, the individual spin that makes you you, your personal ego, your specific memories, your unique story, that localized structure, that whirlpool, dissolves. It loses its boundary.
So I cease to exist.
Yeah.
My personality, my memory.
It's the specific structure of your personality, the ego complex, the narrative thread of you as a separate individual.
Right.
Yes, that particular pattern dissolves. It comes to an end. However, and this is absolutely crucial,
Okay.
the fundamental awareness that experienced that life, the raw consciousness itself that was localized in that whirlpool, does not cease to exist. It doesn't vanish into nothing. It simply ceases to be a separate, isolated fragment.
So it rejoins the ocean.
That's the perfect analogy. It's reabsorbed into the broader, boundless stream of mind at large. The awareness continues, but not as that distinct, limited you emerges back into the whole. So death isn't an end to existence. It's a transformation, a change of state, a return to the universal consciousness from which we temporarily separated ourselves.
Wow. That definitely offers a different way to think about mortality. Not oblivion, but reintegration. It shifts the focus from fearing the end to perhaps appreciating the unique experience of being this temporary individual whirlpool.
Exactly. It changes the narrative significantly.
So, okay, this is a fascinating, elaborate theory, but why should someone listening seriously consider this over the materialistic view, which might seem simpler on the surface? What does this complex idealist framework actually buy us, explanatorily speaking?
That's the key question, right? Kastrup argues his model is superior for two main reasons. It's more parsimonious, and it has much greater explanatory power.
Parsimonious, like Occam's razor. The simpler explanation is better.
Exactly. Occam's razor suggests we shouldn't multiply entities beyond necessity. Idealism, as Kastrup lays it out, posits only one fundamental kind of stuff: consciousness. Everything else matter. Individual minds derives from that single source in a logical way.
Okay, one thing. Conscious.
Right. Materialism, on the other hand, starts with matter energy as fundamental. But then it has this huge problem. How does consciousness, this completely different kind of thing, subjective experience, arise from non-conscious matter? It basically has to posit two fundamentally different categories: matter, and then, through some unexplained process, consciousness.
So materialism has matter plus the mystery of consciousness. Idealism just has consciousness.
Correct. One fundamental stuff, consciousness, which inherently includes experience, is arguably simpler, more parsimonious than two fundamentally different kinds of stuff, matter and consciousness, especially when the link between the two remains a profound mystery in materialism.
Okay, that makes sense from a simplicity standpoint. What about explanatory power?
This is where idealism really shines, according to Kastrup. It offers elegant, coherent explanations for several huge puzzles that materialism either struggles badly with or has to resort to really speculative additions, like the multiverse.
Like,
Well, first, as we've discussed, the hard problem of consciousness. Idealism doesn't solve it, it dissolves it. Consciousness is fundamental, so there's no need to explain how it arises from non-consciousness. Problem gone.
K check. What else?
Second, the fine-tuning of the universe. The observation that the laws and constants of physics seem bizarrely perfect for life to exist, like the universe was rigged.
Yeah, change gravity slightly and it all falls apart.
Exactly. Materialism often explains this as either an unbelievable coincidence or relies on the idea of infinite multiverses. We just happen to be in the lucky one. Idealism says no, the universe appears fine-tuned for life because it's the manifestation of a mind. The inherent nature of this universal consciousness is to generate complex, ordered patterns, including those we recognize as life. It's not an accident, it's an expression of the mind's own nature.
So it's fine-tuned because it's fundamentally mental, and minds create order and complexity.
That's the essence of it. Third, quantum mechanics. Physics at the smallest scales is famously weird, especially the observer effect, where the act of measuring or observing a quantum system seems to change its state, like deciding if something is a particle or a wave.
Right. The universe seems to care for looking, which is weird if it's just dead stuff.
Very weird for materialism. It suggests mind affects matter in a fundamental way. But in idealism, if reality is consciousness, then an act of observation is a mental act occurring within that reality. Of course, a mental act can influence the mental reality it's part of. It's an interaction within the system, not some spooky external influence. It makes the observer effect seem natural, not paradoxical.
Okay. That fits surprisingly well. Anything else?
Yes, a big one. Altered states of consciousness and psi phenomena. Think about powerful psychedelic experiences, vivid lucid dreams, near-death experiences, NDEs, where people report leaving their bodies or experiencing profound unity. Maybe even things like telepathy or precognition anecdotes throughout history.
Stuff materialism usually dismisses as hallucinations, brain glitches, or just woo-woo.
Exactly. They're anomalies, inconvenient data points for materialism. But in Kastrup's idealist framework, they're not necessarily supernatural or impossible. They can be understood as moments when that dissociative boundary around our individual ego becomes temporarily more permeable, more leaky.
Whirlpool walls get thin.
Kind of. It allows for a temporary glimpse or a direct experience of the broader reality of mind at large, or maybe even resonance with other alters. An NDE, for example, might involve the brain shutting down, reducing the filtering effect of the dissociation, allowing consciousness to experience itself more broadly, less localized. It provides a framework to actually study these phenomena seriously, rather than dismissing them out of hand.
So when you put it all together, the hard problem, fine-tuning, quantum weirdness, altered states. Idealism seems to offer a unifying explanation for a lot of disparate mysteries, using just one core idea. Consciousness is fundamental.
That's the argument for its explanatory power. It connects the dots in a way materialism struggles to.
Yeah, it really does feel like it potentially unlocks several doors with one key. It's comprehensive. So, wrapping this up, it's undeniable that Bernardo Kastrup's analytical idealism presents this. Just profound shift in how we might see everything. We go from thinking ourselves as maybe complex biological robots in this vast, mostly empty, non-caring universe.
Right, specks of dust.
To seeing ourselves as essential parts, maybe temporarily fragmented, but integral parts of a living, breathing, experiencing universal mind. It completely changes our place in the cosmos. We're not accidents, we're expressions, not islands, but unique waves in this boundless ocean.
And that, I think, is where the real value lies. Not just understanding the theory intellectually, but letting it really challenge your deepest assumptions about who you are, what the world is. And that naturally leads to a final thought, maybe something for you, the listener, to ponder.
Okay.
If this perspective holds true, if our fundamental awareness does continue as part of mind at large after our individual self, our whirlpool, dissolves, How does that change the meaning or the purpose of this life right now? Yeah.
Does it shift your priorities? Maybe make certain fears, like the fear of just ending completely, seem different? Does it change how you relate to other people, seeing them perhaps as fellow expressions of the same underlying consciousness? What would it actually mean day to day to live with the understanding that you are this unique, temporary pattern within an infinite living awareness?
Yeah, that's definitely something to mull over. What does it mean to live as a whirlpool, knowing you're part of the ocean?
Exactly. Something to explore in your own quiet moments.